Jake Murphy stood at the main docking bay of Sanctuary Station and watched the heavy transport ship arrive. He had been the head zookeeper here for 15 years, and in all that time he had never seen a delivery like this one. The ship was massive, armored like a military vessel, and it carried only one passenger. One very dangerous passenger. The station floated in neutral space, far from any planetary system. It was the first and only wildlife preserve in the galaxy that housed creatures from different worlds. Jake had worked with all kinds of animals during his time here. He had fed the silicon-based hunters from Theta Prime. He had treated the methane-breathing herd animals from the outer colonies. He had even raised a pair of razor hawks from Centauri 7. Creatures so mean they attacked their own reflections. But this was different. The creature coming today was called a Venthrak. It came from a world named Scar Nash, a planet that had been completely destroyed by a terrible disease. The disease was called the Crimson Plague, and it killed everything it touched. Whole forests died. Oceans turned red with dead fish. Cities fell silent as the plague swept through. The Venthrak in that transport ship was the last one alive, the final member of its entire species. Amy Chen stood beside Jake, holding a datapad with all the information about their new arrival. She was his assistant and had been working with him for 5 years. She looked worried. Her hands kept moving nervously over the datapad screen, reading and rereading the same warnings. "Jake, are you sure about this?" she asked quietly. "The reports say this thing has already killed 3 handlers. They had to keep it drugged the entire trip just to keep it from tearing through the hull." Jake did not answer right away. He watched as the transport ship docked with the station. Heavy mechanical arms locked into place. Warning lights flashed red all around the docking bay. A voice over the intercom told everyone to clear the area. Only essential personnel were allowed to stay, and Jake was the most essential person here. This was his station, his responsibility. The airlock door opened with a loud hiss. A group of aliens walked out first. They were Calrothians, tall reptilian beings with silver scales that caught the light. They moved with military precision, each one carrying heavy weapons. In the center of their formation was Commander Vex, the leader of this transport mission. He was taller than the others, with scars across his face that told of many battles. Behind the Calrothians came a medical officer named Zarik. He was shorter, rounder, with darker scales and tired eyes. He carried a medical case that looked heavy. When he saw Jake, he shook his head slowly, like he was already sorry for what was about to happen. "Human," Commander Vex said. His voice was deep and rough, like rocks grinding together. "We have brought the creature as your counsel requested. But I must warn you, this is a mistake. The Venthrak should have been destroyed. Mercy would have been faster than what awaits it here." Jake stepped forward. "We don't destroy the last member of a species, not here. Not while I'm in charge." Commander Vex made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Noble words. But you have not seen what the Crimson Plague does. It does not just kill, it destroys the mind first. The creature in that pod is not an animal anymore. It is a monster, driven mad by pain and infection." The cargo door opened and a reinforced containment pod floated out on anti-gravity platforms. It was huge, easily 20 feet long and 10 feet wide. The metal was scratched and dented from the inside. Jake could see claw marks gouged deep into the reinforced plating, through a small viewport made of transparent steel. He caught his first glimpse of the Venthrak. It looked like a wolf, but bigger and stranger. It had 6 legs instead of 4, each one ending in claws that looked like they could tear through armor. Its fur should have been beautiful, a deep blue color that faded to black at the tips. But large patches of fur were missing, revealing raw infected skin underneath. The creature's eyes, which the files said should glow amber, looked dull and clouded. It was lying on its side in the pod, breathing hard, and even through the thick metal, Jake could hear it whimpering. "How long does it have?" Jake asked. Zarik opened his medical case and pulled out a data pad. 3 weeks. Maybe 4 if we are lucky. The plague attacks the nervous system. First comes the pain, then the madness, then death. There is no cure. There has never been a cure. We have tried everything. What's the plan? Amy asked. "We keep it sedated," Zarik said. "We keep it isolated. We let it die with as little suffering as possible. That is all we can do." Jake watched the creature through the viewport. The Venthrak's chest rose and fell with each labored breath. Even drugged, it looked miserable. Its body trembled slightly, and every few seconds it would whine, a sound full of pain and sadness. Take it to Habitat 7, Jake said. That's our maximum security area. I want full monitoring, climate control set to match its homeworld specifications, and I want the medical equipment standing by. Commander Vex nodded. His soldiers began moving the pod toward the internal transport system. Before he followed them, Vex turned back to Jake. I have seen the Crimson Plague before, human. I watched it destroy my home moon when I was young. 60 million people died in 3 months. This creature is already dead. You are just delaying the inevitable. Maybe, Jake said, but it won't die alone in a cage, scared and hurting with nobody who cares. Not on my station. After the Calrothians left, Jake and Amy made their way to Habitat 7. The habitat was built into the outer ring of the station, with reinforced walls and multiple security doors. It was designed to hold the most dangerous creatures in the preserve. Right now it was empty, waiting for its new and final occupant. They watched through the observation deck as the pod was lowered into the habitat. Robotic arms carefully placed it in the center of the space. Then the pod opened, and the Venthrak was transferred to a medical suspension field. The field held it in the air, keeping it immobilized while it remained sedated. Jake studied the creature for a long time. Up close, even sick and dying, it was magnificent. Its body was built for speed and power. Its teeth, visible even with its mouth closed, were designed for tearing through tough prey. This was an apex predator, a creature that had once ruled its world. And now it was the last of its kind, dying slowly of a disease that no one could cure. Amy touched his arm gently. Jake, there's nothing we can do. You heard the doctor. It's going to die no matter what. I know, Jake said. He did not look away from the Venthrak. But maybe we can make its last days better. Maybe we can give it some comfort. It killed 3 trained handlers. It was scared, in pain, surrounded by strangers who saw it as a monster. Jake finally turned to look at Amy. Everything deserves kindness at the end. Everything. That night, Jake could not sleep. He sat in his quarters and read everything the Galactic database had about Venthrak. They were pack hunters, highly intelligent with complex social structures. They communicated through scent, body language, and a form of grooming that strengthened pack bonds. Young Venthrak stayed with their families for years, learning how to hunt and survive. They were loyal, protective, and according to one researcher who had studied them before the plague, capable of something very much like love. The creature in Habitat 7 had lost everything. Its family, its pack, its entire world. It was alone in a way that few beings ever experienced. And now it was dying, surrounded by aliens who feared it. Jake made a decision that night. He did not know if it would work. He did not know if he would survive trying. But he knew he had to try, because that was what separated people from monsters. People cared, even when it was hard, even when it was dangerous, even when everyone else said it was impossible. 3 days passed and Jake watched the Venthrak every chance he got. The creature remained suspended in the medical field, floating in the center of Habitat 7 like it was underwater. The drugs kept it asleep, kept it from feeling pain, kept it from being dangerous. But Jake could see the machine struggling. The sedation levels had to be increased every 12 hours. The creature's body was adapting, building resistance faster than anyone expected. Amy brought him meals that he barely touched. She tried to get him to rest, to take breaks, but Jake could not stop watching. He saw things that the monitors did not show. He saw how the creature's legs twitched in its drugged sleep like it was running. He saw how its ears moved toward sounds even when its eyes stayed closed. He saw how sometimes it would make soft sounds in its throat, calling for a pack that would never answer. On the 4th day, Dr. Quintal called an emergency meeting. The doctor was a Haxorian, a species known for their medical knowledge. He looked like a large insect with multiple arms and compound eyes that could see in spectrums humans could not. He was brilliant, cold, and believed in facts over feelings. The meeting room was full. Besides Jake and Dr. Quintal, there was Amy, Ben Torres, the security chief, and several representatives from the Galactic Wildlife Preservation Committee. They appeared on screens, their various alien faces showing concern and impatience. Dr. Quintal brought up the medical scans on the main display. The Venthrak is developing resistance to the sedatives. Within 48 hours, we will not be able to keep it unconscious without killing it. Once it wakes up, it will be in severe pain. The plague has progressed significantly. It will be dangerous, unpredictable, and in its final stages of life. One of the committee members, a floating jellyfish-like being from Aquarius Prime, spoke through a translator. Then we must consider humane termination. We cannot allow it to suffer. No, Jake said firmly. Everyone turned to look at him. We're not killing it. Mr. Murphy, another committee member said, this one a crystalline being whose voice sounded like wind chimes. The creature is dying. The plague cannot be cured. What purpose does prolonging its suffering serve? Jake stood up. He had been thinking about this for 3 days, barely sleeping, researching everything he could find. He had a plan, and he knew how crazy it would sound. I want to groom it, he said. The room went silent. Then everyone started talking at once. Dr. Quintal's translator could barely keep up with the mix of languages. Amy closed her eyes and shook her head. Ben Torres looked like someone had just told him his best friend had lost his mind. Commander Vex, who was attending the meeting remotely, made a sound like grinding metal. Human, that is not just foolish. It is suicide. Benthrak are social creatures, Jake explained, speaking louder to be heard over the objections. In their packs, they groom each other. It's not just about hygiene. It's how they bond. It's how they show care and build trust. This creature is dying alone, in pain, surrounded by strangers. If I can establish trust, if I can groom it, clean its infected areas, treat its wounds, I can at least make it comfortable for whatever time it has left. Dr. Quintal's compound eyes focused on Jake with an intensity that was unsettling. You want to physically touch a creature infected with the Crimson Plague. A creature that weighs 400 pounds and has already killed 3 trained handlers. A creature that is, by all medical definitions, insane with pain. Yes, Jake said simply. You will die, the Haxorian said flatly. The creature will kill you within minutes of waking. Even if it does not, the plague itself can sometimes transfer to other species through open wounds. You are proposing to deliberately expose yourself to a lethal pathogen while in close physical contact with an apex predator in its death throes. Ben Torres stood up. He was a big man, former military, and he had worked with Jake for 10 years. They had become friends, the kind of friends who trusted each other with their lives. Jake, please listen to reason. I know you care about animals. I know you want to help. But this is different. This thing killed trained professionals, people who knew what they were doing, people with weapons and armor. They saw it as a dangerous animal, Jake said. I see it as a dying person who needs help. It is not a person, Dr. Quintal said coldly. It is an animal, a specimen. The last of its species, yes, but its death is inevitable. Why risk a valuable human life for a creature that will be dead in weeks regardless? Jake felt anger rising in his chest, but he kept his voice calm. Because it matters. Because how we treat things when nobody is watching, when there is nothing to gain, when it is hard and dangerous and seems pointless, that is what defines who we are. This creature has lost everything. Its family, its world, its future. The least we can do is make sure it does not die alone and scared. Amy spoke up, her voice shaking slightly. Jake, I understand what you are trying to do. But if you go in there, you are not coming back out, please. There has to be another way. There is not, Jake said. He looked around the room, meeting each person's eyes in turn. The sedation is failing. When it wakes up, it will be in agony. It will thrash and hurt itself trying to escape the pain. Is that how you want the last Venthrak to die? Alone in a cage fighting ghosts with us watching safely from behind glass? The jellyfish-like committee member spoke again. What you are proposing violates every safety protocol. The insurance carriers will never approve it. The liability alone would be enormous. Then I will sign a waiver, Jake said. I will absolve the station, the committee, everyone of all responsibility. This is my choice, my risk, my life. There was a long silence. Finally, Commander Vex spoke. His voice was quieter now, almost respectful. I have lived for 80 years, human. I have seen brave things and stupid things, and sometimes they look the same. You have courage, I will give you that. Pointless, wasteful courage, but courage nonetheless. The committee voted. It was not even close. Every member voted against Jake's proposal. But Jake had expected that. He was head zookeeper, and while the committee had oversight, he had authority over animal care decisions. He could overrule them if he was willing to accept the consequences. I am going in, Jake said, with or without approval. But I would appreciate Dr. Quintal providing some medical supplies, antiseptic solutions, salves for the infected areas, bandages, basic grooming tools. Dr. Quintal stared at him for a long moment. Then the Haxorian made a clicking sound that might have been their version of a sigh. I will prepare a kit. I will have it delivered to the habitat via remote drone. I will not be responsible for handing it to you directly, as I do not wish to feel complicit in your death. After the meeting, Ben Torres followed Jake back to his quarters. This is insane, Ben said, not for the first time. Jake, I have seen you do amazing things with animals. I have watched you calm creatures that were wild with fear. But this is not fear. This is a disease that destroys the brain. There is no reasoning with it. No calming it down. Jake started gathering his personal items. He recorded a message to his sister on Earth, telling her he loved her and that if she was watching this, it meant he had tried to do something good. He updated his will. He wrote a letter to Amy, thanking her for being such a good friend and assistant. I have to try, Jake said quietly. Ben, you know me. You know I cannot watch something suffer when I might be able to help, even if the chance is small, even if everyone thinks I am wrong. Ben sat down heavily on Jake's bed. He looked old suddenly, tired in a way that had nothing to do with lack of sleep. I know, that is what makes this so hard. You are not being stupid. You are being exactly who you are, and I am going to lose my best friend because he cannot help being a good person. You are not going to lose me, Jake said, trying to sound confident. I have worked with dangerous animals before. I know how to read body language. I know how to move, how to position myself, how to show I am not a threat. Those animals were not infected with a plague that makes them insane. Maybe the plague is not what everyone thinks. Maybe there is more to this than just a disease. Jake finished his preparations. I have been reading the research. The Crimson Plague attacks the nervous system, yes. But it also seems to feed on stress hormones. Creatures that died quickly were the ones that were panicking, fighting. A few studies mentioned that creatures in family groups lasted slightly longer. What if the social isolation makes it worse? What if giving the Venthrax some companionship, some comfort could help? That is a lot of maybes to bet your life on. Maybe, Jake agreed. But it is all I have. Dawn came too quickly. Jake ate a small breakfast, though he did not feel hungry. He put on his work clothes, the same clothes he wore every day. He did not want armor or weapons. He wanted to look like what he was, a zookeeper, someone who cared for animals. At the habitat, a small crowd had gathered. Word had spread through the station. Aliens from a dozen different species watched from the observation deck. Some had started betting on how long Jake would survive. Others just looked sad, like they were attending a funeral that had not happened yet. Amy met him at the entrance. Her eyes were red from crying. She hugged him tightly, not saying anything because there was nothing left to say. Dr. Quintal's drone had delivered a grooming kit. Inside were soft brushes, cleaning cloths, bottles of antiseptic, and several medical salves. Basic tools, nothing fancy. The habitat lights were dimmed to a soft glow, just bright enough to see but not harsh enough to cause stress. Jake walked slowly through the inner airlock, carrying only his grooming kit. The door sealed behind him with a sound that felt final, like a tomb closing. He was locked in now, alone with the Venthrak. The creature was awake. The medical suspension field had been turned off an hour ago as Jake requested. The Venthrak stood in the far corner of the habitat, its 6 legs spread wide, its body low to the ground in a defensive crouch. Even from 20 feet away, Jake could see how badly it was suffering. Its breathing was labored, each breath a visible effort. The infected patches on its body looked worse than they had in the containment pod. The creature's lips pulled back, showing teeth that could easily tear through bone. A growl rumbled from deep in its chest, a sound that Jake felt in his bones rather than just heard. Jake did not approach. Instead, he sat down on the floor, crossed his legs, and set the grooming kit beside him. He made himself comfortable, or as comfortable as anyone could be while sitting in a room with a 400-pound predator that wanted nothing to do with him. The Venthrak's growl grew louder. Its eyes clouded with pain and sickness, fixed on Jake with clear suspicion. Its body trembled, whether from illness or aggression, Jake could not tell. Every muscle looked tense, ready to launch the creature forward in an attack, but Jake just sat there. He breathed slowly, keeping his movements minimal. He did not stare directly at the Venthrak, which many animals saw as a challenge. Instead, he looked at the creature with soft eyes, glancing away frequently to show he was not a threat. He began to speak, his voice low and gentle. "Hey there," Jake said quietly. "I know you are hurting. I know you are scared. I am not here to hurt you. I am just here to sit with you. The creature did not understand his words, Jake knew that, but tone mattered more than words with animals. The sound of a calm voice could soothe even when the meaning was lost. So Jake kept talking, a steady stream of quiet words about nothing important. He talked about the weather back on Earth, about the first dog he had ever owned as a child, about how his sister was doing back home. He talked just to make noise, to let the Venthrak get used to his presence. Outside the habitat on the observation deck, Amy and Ben watched with growing fear. The medical team stood ready with tranquilizer guns and emergency equipment. Betting pools continued among some of the alien observers. Most gave Jake less than 30 minutes before the creature attacked. A few optimistic ones thought he might last an hour, but an hour passed and then another. The Venthrak had not moved from its corner. It continued to growl, continued to watch Jake with those pain-filled eyes, but it had not attacked. Jake took that as a good sign. If the creature had wanted him dead, it would have charged immediately. The fact that it was just watching meant some part of its brain, some small piece not consumed by plague and pain, was still thinking. Into the third hour, Jake slowly opened his grooming kit. The sound made the Venthrak's ears swivel forward, focusing on the movement. Jake pulled out a soft cloth and a bottle of antiseptic solution. He made no move toward the creature. Instead, he demonstrated on himself, cleaning his own hands with the solution, showing that the process was not painful. He made sure the Venthrak could see everything he was doing. The antiseptic had a strong smell, sharp and medicinal. It cut through the sour stench of infection that filled the habitat. Jake saw the Venthrak's nostrils flare, processing the scent. The growling had stopped several minutes ago, though Jake had not noticed exactly when. Now the creature just watched. Its head tilted slightly to one side. Jake set the cloth and bottle down where the Venthrak could see them. Then he went back to sitting still, hands resting on his knees, breathing slow and even. He was playing the longest game of patience he had ever attempted. Everything in him wanted to rush to try to help immediately. But rushing would get him killed. Animals, especially sick and scared ones, needed time. They needed to understand that the human was not a threat, that approaching would not result in pain or capture. The fourth hour began. Jake's legs had gone numb from sitting in the same position. His back ached, but he did not move, did not shift to get comfortable. Any sudden movement could break the fragile trust he was trying to build, and then so slowly that Jake almost missed it. The Venthrak took a step forward. Just one step, barely moving at all, but it was toward Jake, not away from him. Jake's heart began to beat faster, but he forced himself to remain calm. He did not react to the movement, did not acknowledge it. He just kept breathing slowly, kept looking at the creature with soft, non-threatening eyes. Another step, then another. The Venthrak was limping badly on its front left leg. That leg had the worst of the infections Jake could see now. The skin was raw and weeping, the fur completely gone. Every step on that leg must have been agony, yet the creature kept moving forward. Amy pressed her hands against the observation window, her breath fogging the glass. Ben had stopped watching the betting pools. Everyone in the observation deck had gone silent. This was it. This was the moment where Jake would either succeed or die. The Venthrak stopped just out of arm's reach. It stood there, swaying slightly, its body shaking with effort. Up close, Jake could see just how terrible the plague had been to this creature. It was starving, its ribs visible through its fur. Its eyes were not just clouded, but had a strange red tint to them, a sign of the disease affecting its vision. Drool hung from its mouth, thick and discolored. This close, the smell of infection was overwhelming. For a long moment, human and alien simply looked at each other. Jake could see intelligence in those eyes buried beneath pain and sickness. He could see confusion, wariness, but also something else, something that looked like desperate hope. The Venthrak made a sound different from the growl. It was softer, higher-pitched, a whine that spoke of pain and exhaustion and a loneliness so profound it hurt to hear. It was the sound of a creature that had lost everything and was now facing the one thing it feared most, dying alone. Jake felt his eyes burn with tears. He blinked them away quickly, not wanting to blur his vision now of all times. Slowly, very slowly, he extended one hand, not toward the creature but palm up, resting on his knee, an offering, not a threat. The Venthrak lowered its massive head. Its nose, easily the size of Jake's fist, moved toward his hand. Jake felt hot breath against his skin. The creature's nose was wet and it sniffed him carefully, learning his scent. This close, one bite could take off his entire hand. One claw swipe could open his throat. Jake was more vulnerable now than he had been at any point in his life. The sniffing stopped. The Venthrak raised its head slightly, looking directly into Jake's eyes. And then, with a movement so deliberate it could not be mistaken for anything but choice, the creature took one final step forward. Its head lowered again, this time pressing against Jake's chest. The weight of it was enormous, nearly pushing Jake over backward. But he braced himself, kept his balance, and very carefully, moving as slowly as he had ever moved in his life, raised both hands and placed them on the Venthrak's head. The fur was coarse and matted, sticky with fluids from the infection. But beneath that, Jake could feel warmth, could feel the trembling that ran through the creature's body, could feel the rapid beating of its heart, working too fast, struggling to keep the sick body alive. Jake began to stroke the Venthrak's head, his movements gentle and rhythmic. The creature's eyes closed. Its breathing, which had been ragged and harsh, began to slow. The tension in its muscles eased just a fraction. And then the Venthrak made another sound, one that shattered Jake's heart into pieces. It was a sound of relief, of gratitude, of a pain that was finally, for the first time in so long, being acknowledged by someone who cared. The creature leaned more weight against Jake, trusting him to support it, trusting him not to hurt it, trusting him in a way it probably had not trusted anyone since its pack had died. Outside, Amy was crying openly now. Ben had to turn away, overwhelmed by what he was witnessing. The betting pools were forgotten. The scientific observers were frantically recording everything, marking this as an unprecedented moment in interspecies interaction. But Jake was not thinking about any of that. He was focused entirely on the creature pressed against him, this dying being that had somehow found the strength to trust one more time. He kept stroking its head, murmuring soft words, and began to assess the damage up close. The infections were worse than the scans had shown. The Venthrak's front left leg was in terrible shape. The skin peeled back in places, exposing muscle beneath. There were smaller patches of infection along its sides and back. The creature's breathing, even calmed as it was, had a wet sound to it that spoke of fluid in the lungs. But Jake also saw something the scans had not shown. He saw old scars beneath the new wounds, battle scars, hunting scars, the marks of a life lived wild and free. He saw the powerful muscles still present despite the starvation, evidence of what this creature had once been. And he saw in the way it pressed against him, in the way it had chosen to approach despite eye. Jake Murphy woke up on the habitat floor, his back stiff and his neck aching from sleeping in an awkward position. Morning light filtered through the observation windows. For a moment he forgot where he was. Then he felt warmth pressed against his side and remembered everything. The Venthrak, which Jake had started privately calling Blue in his mind, was still lying beside him. The creature was awake, its amber eyes watching him without fear. When Jake moved, Blue's tail thumped once against the floor, a gesture that looked almost like a dog's greeting. "Good morning," Jake said quietly. His voice was hoarse from hours of talking the day before. "Let me see how you are doing." He carefully examined the wounds he had cleaned yesterday. The infected leg looked marginally better. The angry red color had faded slightly, and when Jake gently pressed around the edges, Blue flinched but did not growl or pull away. That was progress. The creature was starting to trust that Jake's touch, even when it hurt, was meant to help. The grooming sessions became Jake's entire life. Every morning he would enter the habitat carrying food and fresh medical supplies. Amy had argued that he should leave at night, get proper rest, but Jake refused. Blue was just starting to trust him. Leaving would break that trust. So Jake stayed, sleeping on the habitat floor with a creature that a week ago would have killed him without hesitation. The change in Blue was gradual but real. On the second day, the creature ate for the first time since arriving at the station. Jake had brought food that matched the Venthrak diet, raw meat, protein-rich and carefully prepared. Blue had been too sick and stressed to eat before. But now, with Jake sitting nearby, the creature took the food from his hand, eating slowly and carefully. On the third day, Blue stood up and walked without limping. The front left leg was still infected, still painful, but the swelling had gone down. Jake had been applying medicine twice a day, cleaning the wound, removing dead tissue. The creature's body was finally getting a chance to heal. By the fifth day, something remarkable began to happen. The infected patches on Blue's body were shrinking. New fur was growing in some places, healthy and bright. Dr. Quintal watched the medical scans with growing fascination, checking and rechecking the data as if he could not believe what he was seeing. This should not be possible, the Haxorian doctor said. During a video call with Jake, the doctor's multiple eyes all focused on different monitors showing Blue's vital signs. The Crimson Plague has never gone into remission, not once in recorded history. Yet your creature's infection is not spreading. In fact, it appears to be retreating. Jake was sitting in the habitat, Blue's head resting in his lap while he carefully brushed the creature's fur. Maybe the disease is not what everyone thinks it is. Explain, Dr. Quintal demanded. I have been reading all the research you sent me, Jake said. Every report mentions that infected creatures died quickly, when they were alone or in stressful situations. But a few studies noticed that creatures in family groups lasted longer. The plague attacks the nervous system, but it also seems to get worse when stress hormones are present. What if isolation and fear make it stronger? What if Blue's body is finally fighting back because the stress level dropped? Dr. Quintal was silent for a long time. You are suggesting that the Crimson Plague has a psychological component, that it is not purely biological, but is somehow affected by mental state. I am suggesting that being alone and terrified is bad for you, Jake said simply, especially when you are sick. Blue was dying not just from the plague but from grief and isolation. Now the creature has companionship, has care, has a reason to keep living, and the body is responding. This is revolutionary, Dr. Quintal said slowly. If you are correct, it could change how we treat dozens of similar diseases across multiple species. But we need more data, more time to study this. You can study all you want, Jake said, but you stay on your side of the glass. Blue does not need scientists poking at the creature right now. Blue needs rest and care and time to heal. The doctor agreed, though Jake could tell it was difficult for the Haxorian to resist the urge to run more tests. But the results spoke for themselves. Every day, Blue looked stronger. The creature's eyes cleared, the amber glow returning fully. The breathing became easier, the movements more fluid and natural. On the 8th day, Blue started grooming Jake back. It was afternoon, and Jake had been cleaning one of the smaller infected patches on Blue's back. When he finished, the creature turned around and very carefully began licking Jake's hand. The tongue was rough, designed to strip meat from bone, but Blue was gentle. It was unmistakably a gesture of affection, the same way the creature would have groomed a pack member. Jake felt tears running down his face. He did not try to stop them. This creature, who had lost everything, who had been dying alone in a cage, was showing him affection, was accepting him as family. You are a good one, Jake whispered, scratching behind Blue's ears. You are such a good one. By the end of the 2nd week, Blue was walking around the entire habitat without any sign of pain. The creature would follow Jake everywhere he went, staying close like a shadow. When Jake sat down, Blue would lie beside him. When Jake worked on the habitat's environmental controls, Blue would watch with curious eyes. The creature had gone from a dying, aggressive patient to something that looked very much like a companion. The infected areas continued to heal. The front left leg, which had been the worst, now had new fur growing in. The raw, weeping wounds had closed over with healthy skin. Only a few small patches of infection remained, and even those were shrinking daily. Dr. Quintal began inviting other xenobiologists to review the data. Scientists from across the galaxy wanted to understand what was happening. How was a human zookeeper achieving what advanced medicine could not? The answer, it seemed, was simple. He had given the creature something to live for. Commander Vex returned to Sanctuary Station on the 15th day. The Calrothian walked up to the observation deck and stood there for over an hour, just watching Jake and Blue together. The creature and the human were playing, of all things. Jake had found an old ball in storage, something left over from previous animal enrichment programs. He would throw it and Blue would chase it down, bringing it back with what could only be described as joy. I was wrong, Commander Vex said quietly to Amy, who stood beside him. I have served in the military for 60 years. I have seen countless battles, countless deaths. I thought I understood strength. But that human down there, he has shown me something I never expected to see. True strength is not in weapons or armor. It is in choosing compassion when everyone says it is foolish. Amy smiled through tears. Jake has always been like that. It is why he is so good at what he does. On the 18th day, Blue's infection entered what Dr. Quintal officially classified as full remission. The plague was still present in the creature's system. Tests confirmed that. But it was dormant, held in check by a now robust immune system. It was the first documented case of survival from the Crimson Plague in any species. The news spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Scientists wanted to study Blue, to understand how this was possible. Medical researchers believed it could lead to treatments for similar diseases. The Galactic Council called emergency sessions to discuss the implications. But Jake did not care about any of that. He cared that Blue was healthy and happy. That the creature who had been hours from death was now playing, eating, and showing every sign of wanting to live. Ben Torres finally convinced Jake to leave the habitat for a few hours on the 20th day. Jake needed real rest, a proper meal, a shower. He agreed reluctantly, but only after making Amy promise to stay where Blue could see her through the observation window. The creature did not like being alone. When Jake returned 4 hours later, freshly showered and having eaten his first real meal in weeks, Blue was waiting by the habitat door. The moment Jake entered, the creature bounded over, all 6 legs moving in coordination, and pressed against him with enough force to nearly knock him over. "I missed you too," Jake said, hugging the massive head. "I was only gone a little while." But to Blue, who had lost everything once before, any absence was too long. The creature stayed pressed against Jake for nearly an hour, as if reassuring itself that the human had truly come back. That night, as they lay together on the habitat floor, Jake thought about everything that had happened. 3 weeks ago, everyone had said he was foolish. They had said the creature could not be helped, that trying would only get him killed. They had been so certain, but they had been wrong. Not because Jake was special or had magic powers. He was just a zookeeper who believed that every living thing deserved kindness. He had seen a creature suffering alone and had refused to let it die that way. He had shown patience when others would have given up. He had offered trust when everyone else offered only fear, and Blue had responded. Not because of medicine or technology, but because of something far older and more powerful. Connection, care, love. Blue shifted in sleep, pressing closer to Jake's warmth. One massive paw rested on Jake's chest, heavy but comforting. The creature's breathing was deep and even, the sound of health and... The announcement came on the 21st day. Dr. Quintal made it official during a galaxy-wide broadcast that reached hundreds of worlds. Blue's infection had entered full remission. The Crimson Plague, which had killed billions of creatures across multiple planets, had been defeated for the first time in recorded history. And it had been defeated not by advanced medicine or complex treatments, but by simple compassion and care. The scientific community exploded with interest. Research institutions from every corner of known space wanted to study what had happened. Medical journals requested papers. Universities wanted to interview Jake. The discovery had implications far beyond one sick animal. If stress and isolation made diseases worse, and if social bonding could help bodies fight back, it could change how medicine was practiced across the entire galaxy. But Jake avoided most of the attention. He gave one interview to a major galactic news service, and in it, he said something that would be quoted for years to come. "I did not do anything special," Jake told the reporter, "a floating being from a methane world. I just refused to let another living thing die alone and scared. Any species capable of empathy could have done the same. The real hero is Blue, who chose to keep fighting even when there was every reason to give up." The Galactic Council convened an emergency session to decide Blue's future. Representatives from hundreds of worlds attended, either in person or through holographic projection. The debate lasted for hours. Some argued that Blue should be taken to a research facility, studied to understand the remission process better. Others wanted the creature returned to quarantine, worried that the plague could still resurface. A few suggested finding Blue a mate, though with the species extinct that seemed impossible. Jake attended the session, speaking when called upon. He kept his words simple and direct. Blue had been through enough. The creature deserved to live out its life in peace and safety. Sanctuary Station was its home now. If the council wanted to study Blue, they could do so remotely through the monitoring equipment already in place. But the creature would not be moved, would not be poked and prodded by scientists who saw it as a specimen rather than a living being with feelings and needs. Commander Vex stood and spoke in support of Jake's position. The Calrothian, who had once called Jake foolish, now called him the wisest person he had met. Other voices joined in. The floating jellyfish, being from Aquarius Prime, who had originally voted for termination, now argued passionately for Blue's right to live free from interference. The vote was unanimous. Blue would remain at Sanctuary Station under Jake's care. The habitat would be expanded, enriched with features that mimicked the creature's homeworld. A team would search for any other surviving Venthrak, though everyone knew the chances were almost zero. And Blue would be monitored, but from a distance, with respect for its dignity and autonomy. Plans were made quickly. The expansion of Habitat 7 began immediately. Engineers worked around the clock to create something special. They built artificial rock formations for climbing. They created a water feature, a stream that flowed through the habitat. They planted hardy vegetation that could survive the controlled climate. Within a week, the habitat looked less like a cage and more like a piece of Blue's lost homeworld. But the most important change was the addition of doors that could open to other parts of the station. Blue would no longer be confined. The creature would be free to roam supervised areas, to interact with other animals if it chose, to live as close to a normal life as possible given the circumstances. On the morning of the ceremony to officially open the new habitat, dignitaries from across the galaxy arrived. Ships from dozens of worlds docked at Sanctuary Station. The observation deck was packed with representatives, scientists, journalists, and curious onlookers. Even humans from Earth's diplomatic corps made the journey, proud that one of their own had achieved something so remarkable. Jake hated the attention. He wore formal clothes that felt uncomfortable and stiff. He stood on a platform while speeches were made about interspecies cooperation, about the importance of compassion in advanced civilizations, about how one man's courage had changed the galaxy's understanding of medicine and care. Through it all, Jake just wanted to be with Blue. The creature was waiting in the habitat, probably confused about all the noise and activity. Blue did not understand ceremonies or speeches. The creature just wanted its friend, its pack, the human who had refused to abandon it. Finally, mercifully, the speeches ended. The ceremony's climax approached. Jake was supposed to walk into the habitat one final time as Blue's keeper. Then the doors would open and Blue would be declared free to roam the station. It was symbolic, a gesture for the cameras and the history books. But Jake was glad for any excuse to return to the creature he had come to love like family. Jake walked to the habitat entrance. The crowd fell silent. Cameras from 100 different worlds focused on him. He opened the door and stepped inside, leaving the formality and attention behind. Blue was waiting in the center of the habitat. The creature looked magnificent now, fully healed. Its coat had grown back completely, shimmering blue-black in the habitat lighting. Its eyes glowed amber and bright with intelligence and health. Its body was filled out, muscles strong and defined beneath the fur. This was an apex predator in its prime, a creature of beauty and power. Jake walked toward Blue, a smile spreading across his face. This was what mattered, not the speeches or the attention, but this creature who had survived the impossible, who had chosen to trust when trust seemed foolish, who had taught Jake and the entire galaxy that connection and care were more powerful than any disease. "Hey, Blue," Jake said softly. "They made a lot of fuss out there, but you and me, we know what is real. Ready to see your new space?" But Blue did not come bounding over like usual. The creature stood still, watching Jake with an expression that seemed almost solemn. Jake slowed his approach, reading the body language. Something was different. Blue was not scared or upset. This was something else. Jake stopped a few feet away, giving Blue space. "What is it, friend?" Blue moved then, but not toward Jake. Instead, the creature walked past him, circling him slowly. It was a deliberate movement, purposeful. Blue completed the circle, its nose checking Jake's scent, its eyes studying him. Then the creature stopped directly in front of Jake. What happened next shocked everyone watching. It would be replayed on news feeds across the galaxy, analyzed by behavioral scientists and remembered as one of the most important moments in interspecies relations. Blue lowered its body to the ground, all 6 legs folded beneath its massive frame. The creature's head, which normally held itself proud and high, bowed down until its muzzle touched the habitat floor. And then Blue stayed there, perfectly still, in a posture that left no room for misinterpretation. It was a gesture of submission, respect, and gratitude. Inventhrax social structures, which xenobiologists had studied before the species' extinction. This was how a pack member acknowledged their alpha, but it was more than that. It was how Inventhrax said thank you, how they declared someone as family, how they showed the deepest respect and love they were capable of expressing. Blue was not bowing to a keeper or a master. The creature was declaring Jake as pack, as leader, as the one who had given life when death seemed certain, as the one who had refused to give up even when everyone else said it was hopeless. Jake felt his eyes fill with tears. He knelt beside Blue, his hand reaching out to rest on the creature's massive head. "You do not need to bow to me," he whispered. "We are friends. We are family." But Blue stayed in the bow for a long moment, making sure the gesture was understood, making sure Jake knew how much it meant. Then slowly the creature rose and pressed against Jake's chest, nearly knocking him over backward with the force of affection. Jake hugged Blue, his arms barely reaching around the creature's thick neck. He buried his face in the soft fur and let himself cry, not from sadness but from overwhelming joy. They had made it. Against all odds, against all expectations, they had made it together. Outside, the observation deck was silent. Then someone started clapping. Then another. Within seconds, the entire crowd was applauding, the sound echoing through the station. Species that had never agreed on anything all agreed on this. They had witnessed something profound, something that transcended species and culture and biology. Commander Vex stood at attention, his hand raised in a Calrothian salute of deep respect. Dr. Quintal, who prided himself on being purely logical, had to adjust his translator because his voice kept cracking with emotion. Amy sobbed openly, clinging to Ben Torres, who was also crying, though he would deny it later. The ceremony continued as planned. The doors to the habitat opened, connecting it to a safe section of the station. Blue explored cautiously at first, Jake walking beside the creature. They passed through corridors, visited other habitats, and Blue met some of the other animals in the preserve. A few were scared of the large predator. Others were curious. Blue was gentle with all of them, showing a calm confidence that came from being healthy and happy. In the days that followed, Blue became a fixture on Sanctuary Station. The creature had free run,